You ever get that feeling the entire football world keeps sleeping on this team no matter what they do? Every single offseason, it's the same story. Everybody's talking about the other teams in the division, while the Vikings somehow get pushed to the side like they don't even belong in the conversation. But something just happened that could completely change the way people look at Minnesota this season. And trust me, once you hear why, you're going to understand why so many fans are starting to believe this team has a real shot to shock everybody. Stick around, because there's a lot to unpack, and some of these predictions might surprise you. Before we jump in, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you believe in this team, and let me know down in the comments. SKOL Vikings. I want to see the entire Vikings community show up in the comments before we get started. Nobody expected this. For months, the national conversation around the NFC North has followed the same script. The Detroit Lions remain the favorite. The Chicago Bears are the trendy breakout pick. The Green Bay Packers are always given the benefit of the doubt. And somewhere at the bottom of that discussion sit the Minnesota Vikings. But now, one respected ESPN analyst has completely disrupted that narrative with one bold prediction that is getting plenty of attention across the NFL. Benjamin Solak has predicted that the Minnesota Vikings will win the NFC North during the 2026 NFL season. Considering how little national recognition this team has received in recent years, that prediction immediately stands out. Even more interesting is the reasoning behind it, because it isn't based on hype or wishful thinking. Instead, it focuses on something Vikings fans have watched develop over the last several seasons, a defense that has quietly become the most trustworthy unit in arguably the toughest division in football. According to Solak, the biggest difference between Minnesota and the rest of the NFC North comes down to consistency on the defensive side of the ball. While every divisional rival enters the season with significant concerns, the Vikings possess the one defense he believes can consistently perform at an elite level from Week 1 through the end of the season. He starts by looking around the division. Green Bay may still have talented pieces, but losing Micah Parsons for the first half of the season creates a massive hole. On top of that, the Packers also lost defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley, leaving serious questions about whether that defense can maintain its previous level of production. A defense that already looked significantly different without Parsons now has even more uncertainty surrounding it. Chicago presents a different issue. While the Bears generated impressive numbers through takeaways, Solak points out that their overall defensive efficiency, outside of forcing turnovers, ranked much lower. That raises an obvious question. Can they realistically depend on creating that many turnovers again? NFL history usually says no. Turnover production tends to fluctuate from season to season, making it difficult to rely on as the foundation of an elite defense. Then there are the Detroit Lions. Last season, Detroit's defense produced solid metrics across multiple categories, but this offseason has brought considerable changes to the secondary. Amik Robertson departed in free agency. Terrion Arnold is no longer with the team following his release. Even more concerning, standout safeties Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph are not expected to be fully healthy to begin the season. For a defense that frequently relies on man coverage, missing key pieces in the secondary could dramatically alter its identity early in the year. When you evaluate all three rivals together, Solak reaches a simple conclusion. Minnesota is the only team in the NFC North with a defense he fully trusts entering the season. And honestly, it's difficult to ignore that argument. The NFC North may feature some of the most explosive offensive talent anywhere in the NFL, but defensive stability tells a very different story. Every team has offensive playmakers capable of changing games. What separates Minnesota is having a defensive system that has repeatedly shown the ability to create problems regardless of who lines up on the opposite sideline. A huge reason for that confidence is Brian Flores. Once again, Solak places Flores at the very top of the NFL's defensive coordinator rankings. That's an enormous statement considering some of the respected names coaching around the league today. He even argues that Flores consistently gets more out of less talent than coordinators working with stronger overall rosters. His schemes continue to frustrate quarterbacks every single week. The constant pressure packages, disguised coverages, unpredictable blitzes, and adjustments before the snap force offenses to process information at an incredibly fast pace. In today's NFL, where quarterbacks possess stronger arms and greater athletic ability than ever before, Flores attacks something far more important than physical tools: decision-making. Young quarterbacks especially struggle when they're forced to identify pressure, recognize disguised looks, adjust protections, and make split-second reads after the snap. That's exactly where Flores thrives. His defense doesn't simply rely on winning one-on-one matchups. It forces offenses into mistakes before the football is even thrown. Even after important departures like Jonathan Greenard and Harrison Smith, Solak believes Flores has repeatedly demonstrated that coaching, preparation, and schematic creativity can overcome personnel losses. That's a remarkable endorsement of what Minnesota has built defensively. There is another reason for optimism as well. The Vikings addressed one of their biggest weaknesses through the draft by strengthening the defensive tackle position with additions such as Cale Banks and Dominique Orange. Interior run defense was frequently identified as Minnesota's Achilles heel last season, and improving that area could elevate an already dangerous defense into one of the NFL's elite groups. If those additions perform as expected, the Vikings won't simply be good defensively. They could realistically finish among the league's top 5 units, giving this team a legitimate opportunity to compete with anyone on their schedule. But here's where the conversation becomes even more fascinating, because despite all of this defensive optimism, there remains one question that ultimately determines whether Benjamin Solak's bold prediction becomes reality. Do you agree that the Vikings already have the best defense in the NFC North, or do you think another team deserves that title? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because in the next part, we'll dive into the biggest questions surrounding Minnesota's season, why the quarterback position could decide the division, and the surprising prediction involving the Chicago Bears that Vikings fans definitely won't want to hear. That brings us to the biggest variable in this entire discussion. If the Vikings truly are capable of fielding one of the NFL's best defenses, then why isn't everyone already picking them to win the NFC North? The answer is simple: quarterback play. No matter how complete a roster appears, everything eventually comes back to the most important position in sports. That's the one area where uncertainty still surrounds Minnesota entering the 2026 season. Solak's prediction assumes the Vikings receive steady, productive quarterback play, and if that happens, suddenly the conversation changes dramatically. The supporting cast is already in place. Kevin O'Connell has established himself as one of the league's brightest offensive minds, capable of building quarterback-friendly game plans and maximizing the talent around him. Add arguably the best wide receiver in football in Justin Jefferson, an offense filled with playmakers, and a coaching staff that has consistently found creative ways to move the football. And it's easy to understand why so many people believe this roster is stronger than the national media often gives it credit for. Even Patrick Seepman, while discussing Solak's prediction, admitted that Minnesota possesses one of the better environments for any quarterback in the NFL. The pieces are there. The coaching is there. The defense appears ready to carry its share of the workload. Everything now depends on whether the offense can consistently capitalize on those opportunities. That is why this prediction feels so intriguing. It's not suggesting the Vikings suddenly became overwhelming favorites. Instead, it's arguing that they absolutely belong in the same conversation as every other contender in this division. For far too long, Minnesota has routinely been placed fourth before a single snap has even been played. Solak believes that's simply an inaccurate evaluation. In fact, he makes it very clear that his prediction isn't based on being overly pessimistic about Detroit or Chicago. He's not saying either team will collapse. Quite the opposite. He acknowledges just how competitive this division should be once again. His point is that Minnesota deserves to be viewed as an equal competitor instead of an afterthought. That alone represents a major shift in national perception. At the same time, another one of Solak's bold predictions could have major implications for the Vikings, and this one has nothing to do with Minnesota directly. He predicts that the Chicago Bears could trade for star running back Jonathan Taylor. While he doesn't specify whether that move would happen before the season or during the regular season, the possibility immediately raises eyebrows across the division. From Indianapolis's perspective, such a scenario isn't impossible. If the Colts were to struggle early, future draft capital could become extremely valuable. Since they no longer control their own first-round selection after a previous trade, acquiring another premium pick could make business sense under the right circumstances. For Minnesota fans, however, that's not exactly encouraging news. Imagine pairing Jonathan Taylor with Caleb Williams, who is widely expected to continue developing under head coach Ben Johnson. Add an emerging young tight end, talented wide receivers including Luther Burden and Rome Odunze, and one of the league's most respected offensive play callers, and suddenly Chicago's offense becomes even more dangerous than many already expect. That's exactly why the NFC North continues to generate so much excitement around the league. Every team enters the season with legitimate strengths. Detroit remains talented despite important defensive questions. Chicago appears loaded with offensive potential. Green Bay still has an accomplished coaching staff and a capable quarterback. And Minnesota may quietly possess the division's most complete overall roster if the quarterback position delivers consistent production. Interestingly, despite presenting Solak's prediction, Patrick Seatman doesn't completely agree with it. He believes the Vikings will absolutely remain in the playoff picture and finish among the top teams in the division, but he ultimately leans toward Chicago, capturing the NFC North. His projected finish places Minnesota somewhere around 10-7 or 11-6, with a playoff appearance ending in the wild-card round. It's a prediction that many Vikings fans have unfortunately experienced before: a competitive regular season followed by another painful postseason exit. Still, even that outlook reinforces something important. The Vikings are no longer being discussed as a rebuilding team. They're no longer viewed as a franchise simply hoping to stay competitive. Instead, respected analysts are debating whether they can win one of football's toughest divisions. That's a completely different conversation than Minnesota has heard from much of the national media in recent years. Now the pressure shifts from projections to performance. Can Brian Flores once again build an elite defense despite roster changes? Can Kevin O'Connell get the most out of his quarterback and offensive weapons? Can Minnesota finally prove that it belongs at the top of the NFC North instead of fighting against preseason expectations every single year? Those answers won't come from predictions or off-season debates. They'll come on the field, where the Vikings finally have an opportunity to validate what at least one prominent ESPN analyst already believes: that this team has everything necessary to compete for a division championship. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe Benjamin Solak got it right by predicting the Vikings to win the NFC North? Or do you think another team will finish on top? Share your prediction in the comments below. Explain why you feel that way. And let's get the discussion going. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more in-depth Vikings coverage throughout the season, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest Minnesota Vikings news. SKOL!